Hello everyone, this is Julio with the 40K Knights, and I'm with Fernando. Go ahead and say hi.
How's it going, guys?
And today we got a treat for you, a special unboxing of something that's been around longer than probably most of us have been playing. And that would be a box set of the Imperial Guard Praetorian Guard Regiment, specifically the 24th. As you can tell by the box here, this was seen in the game's day of 1997, the Battle of Big Tooth River. And we're really excited to actually have a piece of what is essentially Warhammer history sitting in front of us. We even dug out our Club Pith helmet to celebrate the return of these space British people. So without much further ado, we're going to go ahead and open the box. A full disclaimer, because they're essentially completely OOP at this stage, the only way to find them is pretty much on eBay. And the box, this particular box that we found, did not have the protective wrap that would usually have come. However, we have checked it out and found that all the material inside is exactly as it was way back in '97, minus some packing material that the shipper had put in there. So, without further said, let's go ahead and dig in. Well, first of all, we have the box side, and you can tell it was from a different era of GW. You know, they were advertising free things on their boxes. I mean, I wouldn't imagine the next time they'll do something like that.
Oh my God.
But yes, and it was essentially their version of a get starting kit from back in the era, a full platoon of guardsmen. As you can tell, it is supposed to include 2 squads of Praetorian guardsmen, 10 men, 1 heavy weapons squad, and a company command squad with a commissar. Going back to the back, they'll give you a brief history of the Praetorians as well as the Imperial Guard themselves, and various other information helpful to anyone who's a collector of the Imperial Guard. So let's get cracking to it. Carefully moving the 20-year-old cardboard box to the side, we will see some good old-fashioned advertisement for the now, may it rest in peace, Warhammer Fantasy. Specifically the Lizardmen and an even rarer group of the Praetorians.
Oh, man.
Well, again, this is one way that GW liked to advertise back in the day. So let's go ahead and pop the seal open. Carefully remove all of the packaging material. Thank you, eBay, for making sure that they arrived safely where we needed to go. And apologies, Fernando, for spilling all of them.
It's okay. You can put the white Cheetos somewhere. It's fine.
I'll just put it over here, and it'll be my responsibility to clean them up afterward. Alright, so let's actually start with what's within the case itself. Now, back in the day, they were all sold in clam packs, specifically these types of models. So let's start up with the first one. Praetorian Command, designated trumpet guy and flag bearer. The trumpet guys were stand-ins for comlinks, most commonly used these days. So we'll put them to the side. We have ourselves a Praetorian Commissar, which most of you will probably recognize as the metal Commissar with the power fist that I still see plenty of guard players using these days. Got ourselves a Praetorian Captain. If anybody's seen the movie Zulu, which notably this is what all of this was based off of, back when GW liked to copy a lot of popular media in their models, this would probably be our Michael Caine ripoff. Now we have Praetorian Wounded. Fun fact, the GW actually produced wounded variants of Imperial Guardsmen for several regiments way back in the day. Praetorians, I've seen Tolarians, Vestroians, and I believe the Howlands as well. You don't see too many of them much as anymore. I think the metal Cadian, the one wounded Cadian being the exception, but this pack was included in free with your purchase of the Praetorian 24th. Now we actually start getting troopers, good old-fashioned red coats with pith helmets. This forms the bulk of the box, as you have different, kneeling positions, standing positions, all for the love for people who like to do, gun lines. Got a Praetorian Sergeant here, pretty standard, last pistol, chain sword. Seems pretty, they were equipped more. They're pretty much insurmountable with today's guardsmen and how they're going to be equipped. You got a grenade launcher and a bayonet. Let's see, we got another Praetorian Sergeant for the second squad. This one's actually shooting his gun rather than holding it upright. We have, again, more troopers. And we have some special weapons. We have a melt-a-gun and the old version of the flamethrower.
It looks like a Gene Sealer Cole web gun.
It does. back in the day then. Now we have a Praetorian heavy bolter. Again, the old school bolters which were on wheels, and they were pretty much solid blocks of metal. No bases included in them. Another batch of troopers here. A Praetorian autocannon. Praetorian las cannon. And another Praetorian las cannon. Finally, a Praetorian heavy mortar team. Now in the bottom here, we also have a few more bits that were included in the original pack. If we'll go ahead and carefully open the plastic bag here, we actually have a flag. There's no molded flags here. These, the old school GW flags were actually made of this paper material, and as you can tell, it's for the Praetorian 24th, and they're the traditional lion and laurels. And have ourselves an old-fashioned, and some of you will remember these, Games Workshop handouts. Just take a look through them real quick. Many old memories, including the, I'm pretty sure you can actually see the old metal figures of Nagash here. The instruction manual. Now these are all metal pieces, with the exception of the heavy weapons team, and I believe the Commissar's personal weapon. Everything was pretty much already built. You just had to stick them to your bases. But they, in here, the Games Workshop actually explained the casting process, the equipment needed, the type of glue, and something very hard to find, an actual Praetorian transfer kit. As you can tell, it's pretty much the same as most Guardsmen Imperial Guard vehicles would, with the exception, of course, it mentioning the Praetorian name and the lion and laurels, which was their symbol back in the day. Of course, you can look at the proof mark there. This was made in '97. Going to be interesting to see how this actually turns out to be usable in this, on new models. Well, we'll see. Finally, the Praetorian 24th instruction sheet, as well as their stats, and it gives you a brief explanation of who they were and what they did. For those of you who remember back when Games Workshop used to do Games Days, the '97 Big Tooth River Massacre was one of the largest Games Day table displays they have done ever since, well, not since they built Warhammer World recently.
Right. Yeah.
In it was basically a massive orc victory, and where an orc fortress was attacked by the regiment of the Praetorian Guard and the Talarians. Everything did not go very well for the guards. They were swiftly defeated in a rather impressive looking display that, if you look online, I'm pretty sure you can find some good pictures from it. Anyway, the Praetorian 24th was supposed to be the regiment that was involved in there, and that was reconstituted after their defeat, allowing them a chance to some revenge on the Greenskin menace. Specifically, this platoon, this platoon is Red Company, Yellow Platoon. Hence, you can tell by the color on their flag. But for most people who come across Praetorians, they generally assume that's their colors. As you can tell, as you can see from the Command HQ breakdown, it's very similar to what we use now. You have the command squad, the different individual squads, and the heavy weapons teams, as well as the ability to expand them. Now, if you open up, you can actually see some of the display models, as well as an explanation on how they worked. Again, a hallmark of GW's earlier days, or at least during the '90s. Now we have the actual stats, which were included in this book, and you can tell by the names that, this is back from a more fun, I'm not going to say less grim, dark GW, but they were certainly not afraid to have a little bit of fun. The captain, his name is Carruthers, Commissar Fonbeck, and Sergeant Jenks, and Sergeant Smith. They used to have some fun with the way they named it. Now, some of the people who are a bit more hawk-eyed can see some of the differences in how the guardsmen were back in the day. For example, armor saves. The flak saves were only 6+, but they did provide a 5+ against blast weapons, which, ironically enough, is pretty similar to how flak vests operated back in that time period. Yeah, you can tell also, and that the Commissar had no armor. He was just there. But yeah, so it's an interesting little time capsule back into history here. As you can see, as GW's finally started transferring over to the Guard that we know and truly love back in the day. And this is from 2nd edition, I believe. I could be wrong on that. So it's interesting to, just to see how things were. Well, I mean, that is it for the contents of the box. Again, I'm kind of surprised that not only they were all there, but they were actually in pretty good condition. Granted, everything is pretty much hermetically sealed in their respective clam packs, and part of me is kind of it'll be a sad day having to open them and assemble them, because considered they've survived this long in such an intensive hobby and they're such pristine state. The part of me also wishes that this was back toward the older days of the Guard, where we had regimental doctrines and you could run the Praetorians as something, first rank, second rank, line formation type of fighters that they so are. But we'll see what the future holds for GW. And again, I just want to thank everyone for tuning in and taking a look at this. We cracked open a little bit of GW history here. In the coming weeks, they'll be assembled, prepared, and hopefully soon we'll be able to see them in some battle reports, marching along in their most epic of space British ways, in their shining white pith helmets, hopefully fighting against some orcs to get some revenge in for all those who were lost in Big Tooth River. Oh, and one final thing, they also did appear in the White Dwarf edition. I believe it was 1 or 2 months after Games Day, for the Battle of, I kid you not, Orc's Drift, which the history buffs among you will know about Rourke's Drift, where essentially it's the same thing. A small group of Praetorian guardsmen versus a massive horde of orcs, and in that case they actually won. So they got a little bit of payback in the end, in the annals of Warhammer history. So with that, I'll turn over to Fernando here. Anything you wanted to add?
I just want to say, for 2 decades, well-conserved models, I think this was a worth investment.
I agree too. As a Guard player, when I started getting into the hobby in the late '90s, and even then it was only tepidly, I'll always remember seeing the pictures of Big Tooth River and Orc's Drift and falling in love with the ridiculousness of, was essentially Victorian colonial troops in space. And I'm a history nerd, and that really appealed to me, and I do credit the Praetorian Guardsmen among the other regiments that turned my love into the Guard into, the fact that I collect and run them today. Part of me always hopes that GW brings back the Guard, the diversity of the Imperial Guard. That was part of the fun, having your space, colonial British next to your space Soviet Russians and your space, Lawrence of Arabia types. But it's going to be it's a very good feeling to have a little bit of history here, and again, I look forward to having them up and running and getting some battlefield time in no time. So, well, with that, ladies and gentlemen, I leave you with a shot of the cover of the Praetorian 24th, a little piece of history here from the GW I'll know and love. Thanks again for watching, and tune in for future videos from the 40K Knights.